Some of these ruins were finished while Rome was still a republic. One hilltop was stacked with stone walls that fooled the whole internet into believing ancient Maya fled here. And one carved slab holds writing that nobody alive can read. Most people think Appalachia is old mountains and young history, a few log cabins and a lot of scenery. That's backwards by about 10,000 years. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll be standing on a ruin older than Rome, whose builders never left. You just have to know it's them. Before we start, one thing, and then I'll leave it alone. Everything in this video, the mounds, the carvings, the drowned towns, the sites older than Rome, I gathered into a book called the Appalachian Mysteries Collection. It's the whole map, the parts that don't fit in one video all in one place. If you want it, the link is in the description. That's all. Now, number 17. Number 17, the wilderness that never was. Roan Mountain, Carter County, Tennessee, and Mitchell County, North Carolina. Start with the lie the whole video has to take apart. The high grassy balds on the Roan get sold as untouched wilderness, the way the land supposedly always looked. Stand on one at dawn, and the view runs 100 miles, treeless and clean. It feels ancient. It isn't. These gaps and balds were travel routes for thousands of years, worn by people crossing these mountains long before anyone drew a state line over them. The Over-Mountain men marched through here in 1780, and they were latecomers by roughly 90 centuries. The word pristine describes how the land is managed now. It says nothing about its history. What looks like emptiness is mostly the result of removal. The people who used these routes were pushed out, and then the forest and the marketing moved in to cover the gap. Even the balds themselves are a puzzle nobody has fully closed. Trees grow fine hundreds of feet higher on nearby slopes, yet these summits stay open grass, and the Forest Service now mows some by hand just to keep them from filling in. The wilderness is a recent invention, sitting on a very old address. Keep that in mind, because almost every ruin ahead was built by people the postcard quietly erased. The scenery came last. It was never the point. Number 16, the Bulls Cut from the Rock. Soapstone Ridge, DeKalb County, Georgia. Some of the oldest human-made things here are defined by what's missing. On Soapstone Ridge, a low band of outcrops south of Atlanta, certain boulders carry rows of smooth, rounded scars. Run a hand across one, and it reads like weathering, soft, dish-shaped hollows in gray-green stone. It isn't erosion. Those hollows are where people carved cooking pots straight out of the living rock, roughing out a bowl, chiseling it free, and carrying it off. Soapstone is soft enough to shape with a harder stone and dense enough to hold heat for hours without cracking, which turned these outcrops into an industrial quarry thousands of years ago, back in the late Archaic. That's older than the pyramids at Giza were finished. Picture a worker kneeling at the rock face, tapping loose a vessel that would outlive every language spoken around it. The artifact isn't the boulder in front of you. It's the bowl-shaped absence, and the pot now sitting in a museum drawer or buried in a riverbank downstream. Before anyone here stacked a mound or carved a symbol into stone, they were already doing this, generation after generation, on the same hillside. The first architecture in Appalachia was subtraction. You made something by taking rock away. Number 15, The Page. No one can read Track Rock Gap, Union County, Georgia. The title says older than Rome. This beats that by a mile. Track Rock Gap sits in a pass between Thunderstruck Mountain and Buzzard Roost Ridge in the Chattahoochee National Forest, and its 6 soapstone boulders hold more than 100 carvings, tracks, circles, crosses, shapes like animal and human prints. Go at dusk and rake a flashlight sideways across the stone, because in flat daylight, the marks nearly vanish. Angled light makes them surface like a photo developing in a tray. The easy label is ancient Cherokee carvings, and Cherokee accounts do live here, some describing hunters who paused in the gap and marked the soft stone to pass the time. Others treating the tracks as prints left by beings crossing a threshold place. But the carving here spans roughly 3,600 years and more than one people, which is why no single tidy origin story holds. A 2009 Forest Service scanning project mapped the boulders in fine detail and still couldn't fix a meaning to them. We can read the marks one figure at a time. We still can't read them as a sentence. It's a message that stayed perfectly legible and completely untranslated at the same time, sitting 100 feet off a road most people drive straight past. Number 14. The Giant's Handprint, Kituwah Rock, Jackson County, North Carolina. An hour and a half northeast, near Caney Fork, one soapstone slab carries over 1,500 separate markings, the densest carved rock in the state, and one of the densest in the eastern United States. Kneel next to it, and one figure jumps out fast, a 7-fingered handprint pressed flat into the stone. The Cherokee tie the rock to Sulkalu, the slant-eyed giant they called Kituwah, master of the hunt, said to have left that print leaping down from his home in the high country. That oral connection is strong and well recorded. The dating is not. Estimates swing across thousands of years with no firm anchor, because soapstone gives archaeologists almost nothing to carbon date, and the meaning of the swirls and lines was never written down anywhere but the rock itself. And the surface is dying. Weather, acid rain, and runoff are slowly flattening the marks faster than anyone can fully record them, which is why the site now sits behind a boardwalk and a fence. The story is rich. The timestamp is gone. It's a document being read out loud while it dissolves, and the erosion is winning the race. The carved rock so far has one thing in common. You can photograph it. You can stand in front of it in an afternoon. That's about to end. From here, the map leaves marks on stone for things built out of earth and piled rock. Bigger, older, harder to explain away. And the ruin we're climbing toward isn't carved into anything at all. Number 13. The Wall on the Roan Mountain, Fort Mountain, Murray County, Georgia. Near the summit of Fort Mountain at around 2,800 feet runs a low stone wall about 850 feet long, zigzagging along the ridge and defending nothing you can see. Walk its length and the strangeness sets in. It is too high to guard water, too crooked to be a real fort, and there is no settlement it encloses. So the vacuum filled with legends, pale moon-eyed people who supposedly saw in the dark, a lost Welsh prince named Maddock, Spanish soldiers under De Soto stacking ramparts. Those are folklore and colonial fantasy, not evidence. And they have clung to this wall for 2 centuries because a good story travels better than an honest shrug. The likelier answer is that native people built it for ceremony or gathering. Its pits and mounds shaped by hand for reasons tied to the site rather than to defense, though the exact purpose is genuinely unconfirmed. That's the honest version of a mystery, not nobody knows anything. We know who probably built it, and roughly when, and we still can't say precisely why. The wall kept its meaning far better than it ever kept anyone out. Number 12. The Bird You Can't See from the Ground, Rock Eagle, Putnam County, Georgia. Some ruins were built for an eye that couldn't reach them. At Rock Eagle, thousands of chunks of milky white quartz are piled into the shape of a bird with a wingspan of about 102 feet, tip to tip, sitting on a low rise in the Georgia Piedmont. From the ground, it's a long, low heap of pale rubble, shapeless, easy to walk right past. Climb the stone observation tower built beside it in the 1930s and the pile snaps into focus. Wings spread, a body, a head turned to one side, a raptor laid flat across the earth. It's ceremonial and likely mortuary, built with obvious intent, and best estimates put it somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 years old. Here's the quiet part. The people who hauled and stacked that quartz almost certainly never saw the finished bird the way you can from that tower. They engineered a figure meant to be read from above, from a vantage they built for an eye they didn't have. Most effigy mounds east of the Mississippi are gone now, plowed flat for farmland within a couple of generations of settlement. This one survived by being made of stone, too stubborn to plow through. Number 11. The town under the lawn, Nacoochee Mound, White County, Georgia. In one of the prettiest valleys in North Georgia, where two highways meet, sits a flat-topped mound with a white Victorian gazebo on top, and nearly every photo taken there is framed exactly wrong. The gazebo went up around 1900, a rich family's decorative flourish. The mound under it is a Mississippian platform, the raised base for a chief's house or a council structure, holding burials, marking what was once a whole town's civic and spiritual center. Drive past and your eye goes straight to the gazebo, which is the point. The pretty thing on top erases the settlement underneath. Excavations here recorded dozens of burials in the outline of the community that built and used this platform across generations, long before any road crossed the valley. What's left in the tourist frame is a lawn ornament on a grassy hill, photographed 1,000 times a week by people who never register what the hill is. The valley kept the scenery and forgot the city that raised the ground. It's one of the cleanest examples in these mountains of a postcard sitting directly on top of the thing it replaced. Number 10. The capital they call a picnic spot, Etowah Mounds, Bartow County, Georgia. This one isn't a ruin in the crumbling sense. It was a capital. Along the Etowah River near Cartersville stand three big earthen mounds, a plaza, and a deep defensive ditch that once ran with river water. This was the core of one of the most intact Mississippian sites in the southeast, occupied from roughly 1,000 to 1,500 years ago. Climb the 63-foot staircase up the main mound, and the ground below organizes itself into a city. The flat plaza, the smaller mounds, the layout of a stratified society with a ruling class, commoners, and ceremony. The lazy name Indian Mounds does real damage here because it flattens a seat of power into a vague curiosity you photograph and leave. Dig into the record and it sharpens fast. One mound gave up a pair of carved marble statues, a seated man and woman, painted and buried with the honored dead, and now among the finest pieces of native art recovered in the region. This was a place that governed a valley. Etowah is a capital demoted to a picnic ground label. The scale is still standing for anyone willing to climb the stairs and look down. Number 9. The trap still working. Stonefish weirs on the French Broad River, western North Carolina and Tennessee. The oldest working structure in this whole countdown might be a shallow V of rocks lying in a river. Cross certain bridges over the French Broad at the right water level and you'll see one, a faint stone V, its point aimed downstream, throwing a slight wake across the current. Most people read those as natural riffles or the ruins of some old colonial mill dam. Many are neither. They're fish weirs, low stone walls built by native people before European contact to funnel fish into a narrow trap at the point of the V, where they could be gathered by hand or basket. And here's the part that stays with you. Some of them still channel fish today, working exactly as designed, centuries after the people who laid the stones stopped being counted in anybody's history of the river. A few were rebuilt or reused by later settlers, so not every weir is purely ancient, and that is worth saying straight. But the engineering holds. It never needed rescuing or restoring. It was just infrastructure nobody recognized as a ruin, quietly doing its job underwater that tubers and kayakers float straight over every summer weekend. We're at the halfway point, and everything so far has one thing in common. It's still standing, still visible, still above ground if you know where to look. That's the easy half. From here, the map goes down, into water, into caves, into towns that were drowned on purpose, and into builders the story pretended had vanished. The certainty drops from here on, and the deepest ruin ahead turned out to be the most alive. Number 8, older than Rome, Grave Creek Mound, Moundsville, West Virginia. Here's the literal payoff. In Moundsville, West Virginia, a town better known for the grim old penitentiary across the street, stands a cone of packed earth 62 feet tall, built by the Adena people and finished around 250 to 150 BC, while Rome was still a republic that had not yet met its first emperor. Stand at the base and try to hold the number in your head. More than 57,000 tons of earth, moved one woven basket at a time, an estimated 3 million basket loads, raised in stages over generations. It was once ringed by a moat, some 40 feet wide, and surrounded by companion mounds. The town grew and ate all of it but this. Then there's the famous twist. A small inscribed stone was reportedly pulled from the mound during an 1838 dig and spent decades fueling theories of ancient Old World visitors who supposedly beat Columbus by a couple thousand years. Modern scholars regard that inscription as a hoax. The mound is entirely real and genuinely older than the Roman Empire. The mysterious writing was the one part somebody made up, which tells you the real thing never needed the forgery to be extraordinary. Number 7, the fake Lost City. Track Rock Terraces, Union County, Georgia. Track Rock Gap comes back, and this time it isn't the carvings. Climb the slope above those boulders and the hillside is stepped with hundreds of stone walls and rock piles, agricultural terraces marching up the mountain. In 2011 and 2012, a claim tore across the internet. This was a lost Maya city. Ancient Maya who fled north after their civilization collapsed and rebuilt in the Georgia mountains. It was irresistible. It went viral, and it was wrong. When archaeologists led by Johannes Lubser actually surveyed the ground and dug test pits, they found no Maya and no Spanish colonial ruins. They found a large Native American stone terrace complex, built and worked over roughly 1,000 years by the same peoples who lived throughout these mountains. The terraces are the real achievement, and the fantasy very nearly buried them because lost civilization flees to Georgia, sells, and local farmers engineered a mountainside doesn't. The gap that carved messages into stone also terraced its own slope to grow crops on it. The boring answer was the impressive one the whole time. Number 6, the village under the lake, drowned Cherokee town sites, Little Tennessee River, Monroe County, Tennessee. Not every ruin here is hidden by forest. Some are hidden by water on purpose. Across eastern Tennessee, 20th century dam projects flooded river valleys that held ancient towns, mounds, and Cherokee ground. Some of these were the oldest and most important native sites in the entire Southeast, places whose names still carry weight for the Cherokee today. Look out across one of those calm reservoirs, all boat ramps and shoreline and jet ski wake, and picture a plaza and a mound sitting on the bottom of it in the dark. As the water rose behind the dams, archaeologists ran salvage digs against the clock, pulling out what they could before the valley went under for good. Much of the rest is still down there, drowned but not gone. This is where the tone has to change, because this isn't ancient loss. It's 20th century loss, deliberate and recent, stacked on top of the older removal that emptied these valleys in the first place. A lake built for weekend recreation floats over a town people were still tied to by memory and blood. The deepest ruins in this stretch don't have a trail. They have a shoreline and a depth reading. The rest get older, stranger, and harder to reach. No staircases, no towers, in some cases, no public access at all. We're leaving standing architecture for deep time and disputed origins. And the last one predates almost everything you've seen, while sitting closer to right now than you'd ever guess. Number 5, the art made in the dark cave. Glyphs, Cumberland Plateau, Tennessee. The most private ancient art in Appalachia was made where daylight never reaches. Deep inside caves on the Cumberland Plateau passed the last of the natural light in what researchers call the dark zone, there are figures deliberately traced into mud banks and pecked into stone walls, a whole tradition of underground art found across the region. Picture the work it took, crawling half a mile in, then drawing by the light of a burning cane torch, in total black, broken only by the flame you carried on your back. Some of this art predates Rome, made by the same broad cultures raising mounds up in the daylight. And here's the loop that closes between ancient secrecy and modern. The exact cave locations are kept deliberately vague by archaeologists, published without coordinates, because publicity brings looters and vandals who would scrape the walls bare. Art made to stay unseen is now guarded to keep it that way. The people who made it chose the dark on purpose for reasons that went with them. The people protecting it now honor that same choice for entirely different reasons. Two kinds of secrecy, 2,000 years apart, pointed at the very same chambers. Number 4. The wrong ancient story. Stone chambers, western North Carolina and Virginia Blue Ridge. Scattered across the Blue Ridge are dry stone structures that pull in one very specific kind of story. Low corbelled chambers, stacked walls, standing stones that certain writers insist are Celtic, or Phoenician, or otherwise ancient European, proof that someone crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus. Duck into one, and it's cool and close and dim like a root cellar dug into a hillside, which is exactly what most of them are. The honest split matters here, and it's the whole point of the entry. The large majority of these features are colonial-era root cellars, livestock shelters, and field clearing piles thrown up by farmers, or genuine native constructions, not evidence of some secret ancient voyage. A small number do genuinely resist easy dating and stay open questions. Doing this right means keeping those two piles apart instead of sweeping all of them into a romantic story about a lost white civilization, a fantasy that has a long and frankly ugly history in American archaeology because it was often used to write native builders out of their own land. The thrilling explanation is almost always the wrong one. That doesn't make the true one boring. It just means the true one has real people in it. Number 3. The mound that named a culture. Criel Mound, South Charleston, West Virginia. An entire ancient culture is named for a place most people have never heard of, and one of its mounds now sits in the middle of a traffic circle. In South Charleston, the Criel Mound rises about 30 feet out of a small park, ringed by a road, a ball field, and the everyday traffic of the Kanawha Valley. Cars loop around a burial monument older than most of written American history. This valley was once thick with mounds and earthworks like it, a dense ceremonial landscape along the river, most of it plowed flat or paved over as the valley industrialized into coal and chemicals. When the Smithsonian dug the Criel Mound in the 1880s, they found multiple burials stacked at different levels, the kind of layered ceremonial construction that helped define the Adena. That's the name archaeologists now use for a whole era of early Eastern North America. And a defining example of that era is a grassy hump the locals drive around on the way to work, most of them never told what it is. A civilization's namesake, sharing a roundabout with parked cars. That single contrast is the entire video in one shot. One last drop, and it's the oldest and the least reducible. The final two ruins strip away the last comfortable assumption that these builders belong in the past tense at all. Number 2, the city made of 10,000 meals. Shell Mounds, Tennessee River Valley, Tennessee. Some ruins here were built out of dinner. Along stretches of the Tennessee River sit huge shell mounds, hills piled up over thousands of years from the discarded shells of freshwater mussels, meal after meal after meal, until the refuse itself became terrain you could stand a house on, walk one, and the ground crunches under your boots because it isn't soil. It's shell, packed and compressed feet deep. From a distance, it reads as a natural rise in the floodplain, an unremarkable bump above the water. It's entirely human-made, some layers reaching deep into the Archaic period, thousands of years before most of the named cultures in this video existed. Older than the mounds, older than the carvings. And these shell heaps hold burials, which means they weren't just a dump. They became sacred ground, a place to lay the dead among the accumulated days of the living. This is where the deep time vertigo really hits. Every layer is a stack of ordinary meals, so many of them that the simple act of eating slowly raised a landform out of a riverbank. The oldest architecture in these mountains started as an accident, became a habit, and ended as a grave. Nobody set out to build it. Time did. Number 1. They never left Kituwah Mound, Bryson City, Swain County, North Carolina. Here's the ruin the whole countdown was climbing toward. And the twist is the one thing every other entry left out. It's not lost. Just outside Bryson City, along the Tuckasegee River, sits a low grassy mound only about 6 feet tall. It doesn't look like much until you learn people have lived on this exact ground for close to 10,000 years, and that this mound is Kituwah, the mother town of the Cherokee, the first Cherokee village, the place the people took their very name from, calling themselves the people of Kituwah. A sacred fire is said to have burned on this mound for centuries. It once stood 15 to 20 feet tall until nearly 200 years of plowing wore it down, after the British burned the town in 1761, and the land slipped out of Cherokee hands into a farm called Ferguson Fields. And here's the part that reframes every ruin before it. In 1996, the Eastern Band of Cherokee bought this ground back for over $2 million, their first major land purchase in more than a century. And today, Cherokee families carry soil to the mound by hand to slowly build it back up. For 200 years, outsiders looked at mounds like this and invented a vanished race to explain them. Mysterious mound builders, lost civilizations, ancient anyone at all, rather than the native nations standing right there the whole time. Nothing vanished. The people who built the oldest ruins in these mountains are still here, still tending them, still adding to them by the handful. The real ruin was never the earthwork. It was the missing chapter, removal, survival, and coming home, quietly edited out so the mound could seem unexplained. You were handed a map with that page torn out. And the strangest thing in all of Appalachia is how long almost nobody noticed the tear. Appalachia isn't old mountains with young history. It's some of the oldest human history on the continent, wearing a costume of empty scenery, built by people the postcard tried to delete. So tell me in the comments about the one near you, the mound, the wall, the carved rock, the stretch of ground outsiders drive past and explain away. Subscribe if you want the real map instead of the brochure. The next investigation is already waiting for you right there on screen, and the full collection is in the book linked below.